Hello. Let's see, that's the right one. Hi, how's it going?
Good, good. Um, yeah, sort of trying to find a good lighting, but it's bad.
Oh, no worries.
Yeah, I was like one of my projects was like to figure out how to set up my apartment. I don't know if you live in a tiny apartment like I do, um, but because I assume you live with your, sorry, your wife.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and our daughter,
Okay. What's her name?
Christiane.
Christiane. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Um, So, yeah, I don't know if you like that like my term apartment is basically 400 square foot, and I'm like, I gotta figure this out, like, but whatever.
Yeah, yeah. No, I live in Auburn. We have like half of this little duplex and we have like a little backyard, so it's not too terrible. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. Do you
Yeah.
work in Melbourne as well, or like, I mean, since the pandemic?
Yeah, before the pandemic, I was, and my work's actually, or former work is right across the street from where we live, and my partner works there as well. So it's like super short commute, which is kind of helpful because, yeah, I really don't like having to wake up early for work or
Yeah,
other stuff. So,
yeah.
yeah.
So is Christiana still going into work?
Oh, that's our daughter. Rosa is my partner. Yeah,
Oh,
she does every once in a while, but most of her meetings and stuff are through, like Zoom, like we're doing right now. So yeah, it's kind of interesting times we live in, and I don't
yeah,
know, maybe we could just talk a little bit about our experiences so far in like the MSW program and what
yeah.
that's been like during the pandemic maybe too.
Yeah, I think so. Hold on. I'm gonna try and move here really quick.
Okay.
No, not any better, but whatever.
Or is that did you make that artwork on the wall
Um,
there?
so I made this one, and actually, the nice thing about having a webcam is that I can actually move it around.
Yeah.
So I made that one, and I made this one,
Oh, awesome.
and one I stole from Love Lounge because I really like Blondie. And that poster my friend made. She used to be a DJ
Oh,
and
cool.
play only French music, and that's kind of how we became friends. um, so yeah, but no, yeah, and then actually I have that one where it's like Seattle. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
this side will be better. Which I did when like at the beginning of the summer,
Uh-huh.
um, where um where we like had when they like it was like right around Chop or Chaz got started.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of um, I got one powerful life, but I hate it. But that's about it. What about you? Do you like making art?
Um not so much. I mean, every once in a while maybe draw something on like a birthday card or something like that, but that's about the extent of it. Don't really have a whole lot of I guess artistic talent in that regard, but drawing is kind of fun every once in a while.
Yeah. I yeah, drawing is kind of like it's, I don't. I'm like I don't think I have any artistic talent drawing, but I do like it. It's because I've been more of a writer my entire
Yeah,
life, but drawing can be helpful. Um,
definitely. Yeah.
so that's kind of it. But yeah, um, God, I don't know where to start with the MSW program. It's um okay. It's kind of like, I don't know. I'm trying to think of a comparison that would work well. Let's say it's um I don't know, it's like, well, like maybe you're like, I can't think of anything. I'm like, it's like being a vegetarian and I'm like butcher chop. I just don't know. I guess to start off, what so um our program, I think to start off, the first thing that's really unfair about it is it's that we have to pay per credit, which is really, 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 really unfair. I've taken classes because I don't work, so I've taken classes full time because I wanted to.
Yeah.
um, and some might say that might be my fault, but still, I think it's really ridiculous, especially like since they are working people. So to me, it kind of feels like, I don't know, very classist, and people could be like, well, at least they have more money. I'm like, how do you know that? Like, I don't know, like experience that I've had in like classes with the day program, it kind of feels like wealth related. Probably the
Yeah.
kids in the day program are have as much or even more money. I don't know that. I
Yeah.
mean, obviously, but I don't know, I think that's very unfair. And I think a lot of these professional programs do take advantage of people,
Hmm.
or like sort of, I don't know, like certain things that make it so it's very hard for people to go for certain jobs. Like I think with law school you have like thousands of dollars in debt,
Yep.
and hundreds of thousands. Same with being a doctor, and even getting those loans, you have to like, I don't know, in China, they, we talk about China's social score, but um, like, or a credit score um s- scheme is, it's basically the same. It's, or even worse. Like, if you have a bad credit score, you can't get housing. It's like, sorry, you don't,
You don't
you
deserve
don't,
it.
yeah, you don't deserve it. You don't deserve it. So you should probably just like, you know, live on the street. And then there's the point that too, people born in poverty or explicit poverty, it's hard for them to get a bank account, let alone a credit card. So it's all very great. That's my initial thoughts. How do you feel about the EDP program? Or
Yeah.
I mean, or not even that, or like the school of social work at large too.
I mean, I don't know. I guess it didn't really necessarily come in with any like expectations, but I think if I had, they probably wouldn't have been met because I mean, for the most part, the experience has been pretty underwhelming, especially, their inability to kind of advocate for us during this time, even though we're still paying full tuition for practicum and for our classes, even though all we're getting out of it is access to Zoom for class and then like Canvas and like discussion boards. It's like, and they have like a several $billion endowment that UW does. So they could definitely help out
Yeah.
students during this time, a lot of who are really, struggling and like all that stuff. And just doesn't really seem like the program, at least the program higher ups, are really living up to the social justice values that we should all be fighting for as, social workers. And I also think I heard that EDP credits, we are actually charged more than people in the day
Oh, no,
program, which
yeah,
is
that's the
just
thing.
nuts.
So we charge more per credit as well.
That's what I heard. Yeah, somebody had told me that a while ago that it was in our program. And somebody also kind of had made the point like colleges are corporations, and we're kind of, I feel like we're seeing that and experiencing that right now, and it's just like messed up. And it's like, I mean, we have on the UW campus, there's a statue of slave owning white supremacist George Washington, for God's sakes. I mean,
Do you watch Renegade Cut? He had this great thing where he's like, no precedents, or I can't remember why I watched it, where like slavery was kind of like already outlawed in Philadelphia or like DC when he was there. So there was like a certain thing. Of course, there's always certain measures to make sure that if people really want to keep their slaves, they can. And one
Yeah.
of it is like not established residency. So they would take their slaves every 6 months and move them to like around these states so they could keep them. And yeah, I wonder if there's still for a while there they were throwing red paint on him, so that was a lot of fun. But
Yeah.
god forbid you do that, because people has such a it's almost a religion to, if you can't say anything, because
The
it's
founding fathers.
yeah. Yes. And that video I do recommend. I don't know, I'll link you to it, but it is so true. Well, with the word fathers, um, it kind of like makes us feel that we're like a family by connecting us through this. And it's like the start of nationalism. I don't
Yeah.
I don't know if like there's a lot of different nationalism, but I don't know if Canada has the founding fathers, but Canada is a hot mess in other things too. But
Yeah.
yeah, I feel like that's a particular thing. And you're right, we are, or the School of Education, or like a lot of like Bill Gates and whatever his friend was, what's his name, Allen, whatever, Paul Allen. A lot of their stuff is at UW. So there's all this neoliberal influence there too.
Yep. Yeah, and it's like, I mean, we shouldn't need a society where like we shouldn't have a society where philanthropists exist. We should just have a society where everybody's needs are met and don't have to rely on the whims of billionaires like Bill Gates to, go to Africa and kind of dictate how those people live their lives with regards to getting certain types of medications and testing things on those people that have been, the medication has been like outlawed to use in the United States. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, just like the whole kind of nonprofit industrial
Industrial complex.
complex.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
okay. There we go. That's a starter because I could go on that forever. I actually, well, actually, probably shouldn't say, but I'll tell you later, because it might give away like where I live too closely. But
Yeah.
so there's, um, exactly. The reason why these philanthropies like are allowed, one is because you actually make money off of it.
Yep.
Like, yeah, and it's outstanding. Like I've learned that you only really have to spend like 5% of your money on what you're doing, and otherwise it's like a lot of
Yep.
money, and also a lot they can write off in taxes, and it's like a wealth generator.
Hmm.
And it is also in a way yeah, it's controlling the poor. And because when these people have these special fundings or block fundings, it's like um, they get to set the limits of how they're going to do it, and they usually push their neoliberal agenda through. And I think, you know, one thing that I feel could do so much for quote unquote homelessness crisis in the Pacific Northwest would be to basically stop contracting out. I used to be like, so I do have this weird thing because I don't trust the government as much as I used to.
Yeah.
But from my experience when contracting out and giving all of this like nonprofits contracts, it like sort of like obfuscates, it obfuscates clarity. So, and they're also not government workers, so you can't, I don't know, let's say you want to figure something out, but because it's a nonprofit versus a government entity, like how much rights do you have that?
Yeah.
And then also like so that is like a lot. And I feel it's also a way to cut off, to undercut the wages of case managers and social services. Like you could look at jobs at a nonprofit as a housing case manager, and you can look at like maybe the county, and there's like a $10 wage difference. And not that our unions sometimes sometimes feels like our unions work more with the work than us, but also more most nonprofits don't have unions, and
Yep.
I think they have, and if they do try to unionize, it's really a mess. And yeah, like there's so many nonprofits that I know, they're like, instead of director, they're like CEO or blah blah blah, um or like they take the contracts that they get is like they have a huge market of it. Like DESC basically has most of the homeless shelters in Seattle. Same with
Mhm.
the Salvation Army, which that also has a problem. And and then when I was the case manager, we're like, well, we can't get you there because this group kind of has dibs there. So isn't that ridiculous? Being like, this other agency has dibs over this shelter, so I can't get you in. And that's
Yeah.
basically how it works. So at least if we're still gonna means test and I feel a streamline it would be doing that. I feel like the only people who bring the nonprofit industrial complex is a few, and then the other type tend to be super fright right people who think about it for the wrong reasons. So now, so for a
Yeah.
while, I was just like, oh, this must be some, and then I was like, oh my god, there is. In capitalism, there's always a complex somewhere.
Yep. No, that's true. And like you're talking about how, outsourcing what had maybe been the role of, these government agencies before to these, private, companies or organizations, whatever. And I think a lot of that kind of started under, Ronald Reagan. He had a huge push to privatize a lot of these services and outsource them, especially to, organizations that were tied to different forms of like Christianity and
Yeah,
stuff like that. And even this really goes to like imperialism too, because organizations like Human Rights Watch, like, oh, that sounds really nice, but then their executive director or like the CEO, this Kenneth Roth person, keeps talking about how the elections in Venezuela weren't stolen or were stolen, and there's no like democracy there, and it's like, but yeah, it's just like, yeah, we just live in, like, Trump was right. There's definitely shithole countries, but I mean, the United States is on the top of that list, in my opinion.
yeah. Yeah, and it's so true as well because the I forget what the name is, and it makes me feel particularly mad. But you're right, like human rights and like the UN, all of them in a way are just to service capitalism. And then, like, if Reagan was alive today, he would be happy to see basically uh, Gilded Age renewal. I don't know if
Mhm.
that was what he was going for. Um, but yeah, I think from the start, he was intent on destroying, um, services and public works and stuff like that. And one of them, and it was also so much propaganda, so much like, what is that thing that he said? Um, Hi, the scariest thing someone can say is like, I'm from the government and I'm here to help.
Yep.
And it's just, and you're like, oh, what? I mean, yeah, I could talk a million. He's my least. I feel like, yeah, because I was born out of the country, and so much of what Reagan has done has affected me, and he makes me very angry, but still, like, the Republican and even Democrats, everyone gets. I wouldn't be surprised if Trump somehow gets, like, what is that thing?
Rehabilitated his
Yeah,
image.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, they are completely rehabilitated. I remember someone, like some news anchor from one of these, mainstream media sort of thing, was just like, this is not the Republican Party at one time had some respect, and one of us was when Ronald Reagan was like, precedent. And then I'm like, neoliberals want like Latino support or immigrant support, and when you say shit like that, it's not because it's, Democrats aren't losing because people are like, oh, defund the police. They're losing because they are just neoliberal shills who, yeah, they don't care. And if we do or we don't, like, the media also talked about how much the Latino vote went for Trump. but in Democracy Now, Juan Gonzalez was just like, that's not true at all. And so yeah, it's always, once they've used like a progressive or liberal thing, um, they are just as worse and willing to be in bed with the Republicans. There's so many things that I agree on.
Yeah.
It's incredible. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a lot of people kind of have Trump derangement syndrome in a
Yeah.
lot of ways, but
Yeah.
he's just the symptom of like the larger, issue. And I mean, and then like the whole kind of conspiracy during 2016 was that like Russia stole the election. There's no way, Trump could have beat Hillary and all that stuff. But in fact, like that shows how horrible of a candidate Hillary was to be able to lose to Trump. But like the Democrats didn't want to do any soul searching. They just wanted to blame Russia and all these, outside agitators. But it's because you actually have to give people a reason to vote. And oftentimes Democrats didn't do that. And I mean, the only reason I really think Joe Biden won was because he's not Donald Trump. He wasn't running on policy like Bernie Sanders was. And yeah, like you said, for a vast majority of things, both the Democrats and Republicans, agree on not really looking out for the best interest of the working class. And we've definitely really seen that during this pandemic. What if people have gotten that one time means tested $1,200 check while, these huge corporations and the wealthy have been funneled trillions of dollars? And
Yeah.
it's like, I saw somebody say like that money could have given everybody in the United States $20,000. Like everybody could have stayed home. We wouldn't have 300,000 dead. We wouldn't have tens of millions of people out of work. But it's like the system's so dysfunctional, but it's kind of by design, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of doing it exactly on purpose what it's supposed to do. Sometimes they're very obvious about it, other times they're not. Other times it's just awful. Like you said, it means sussing. Um, and another thing, curriculum wise, for school, it's pretty neoliberal. But one class that I do remember that we did talked about was like this entitle versus, and I'm gonna use entitle here, and I know you're gonna, the definition I'm gonna use, right? Like entitle, within, which is just like, it means like welfare automatically for everyone. But again, the word entitle has kind of like negatively been used, because even if we use it in the other sense, how dare you be entitled to decency and human
Yeah.
rights? How dare you? But and it was like looking at these different models of welfare, where it's like, um, you know, unentitled and entitled, and it's like, it is incredibly means tested, in places like where it is a communist, or a, or in history, like automatically entitled at the fall of the Soviet Union. I was reading this book, I think but or something, where people were for the first time, it's like, what's a social worker? What do you mean I have to apply for unemployment? What do you mean I have to apply for this?
Mhm.
And I think again that also is like a waste of money. Like a lot of, it's there's so much of government inefficiency. But I when I mean this, it's just like because they don't really care about it, and because they already know that most of the tax that we're gonna pay, it goes to subsidize the rich. I mean, even here in Seattle, we basically just pay the fees for Jenny Durkin's recall election.
Yeah.
Um, so not only was it thrown out, even though it shouldn't have, and the once socialist council member, Kasham, I always say her name wrong, and I need to learn how to say it
Sean
better.
Sawant, I think, right?
Yeah, yeah, and every 3 years there is a like a recall campaign by some right wingers who are not even in local politics. Like, it's awful, and they always let it happen. It's so, I feel like there's a majority of actual people in Seattle who wanted to recall Jenny Durkin than over Kasham. But because whatever, Jenny Durkin has being the queen of kissing up to Amazon and everyone else.
Yep.
Um,
And the police.
and the police and Nordstrom. Remember
Yeah.
when he cried over Nordstrom? That was like the worst thing. I was just like, oh no. But yeah, I know that it's just, and now they're like, okay, we passed this ordinance, and basically we paid for it. We Because if it's used with city money, which most of it we pay in high sales taxes, we are the largest city in one of the states with the most regressive tax system.
Yep.
Hi, Bill Gates and Bezos don't live here because it's sunny and beautiful California. It's because we have no income tax, and there's just a bunch of tax breaks for companies. Like, I feel like you're more likely to get money in this pandemic by trying to trick or grift the government. Like, be like, I'm going to start this business, blah, 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 or some sort of like, because I've seen so many, like, this company ended up getting this much money and they didn't end up doing anything with it,
Yep.
than just being someone who's like starving.
Needs it.
It is so awful. And yeah. And at the end, we subsidize the taxes of the rich. Not only do we not, we don't like, don't be angry someone's, getting food stamps or anything. We are subsidizing the taxes of the rich. We're subsidizing the taxes on the companies. Like,
Yep.
every time they pass a measure for a company, in the ordinance they never write cannot pass on to the customer. But they so it always sends to you, like, the sugar tax. um why do I have to pay it? Why doesn't Coca-Cola pay it
Mm.
instead? Why doesn't McDonald's pay it instead? What is it so it's yeah, we get the poor get taxed the most and pay the most into the system. Or M- Mitch McConnell, who I don't like throwing the word psychopath around, and I don't think I even would say that about Trump. I would say that about Mitch McConnell. He clearly has like no sympathy, and a large argument for it was like, well, what if illegal immigrants get it? And it's like, immigrants paid so much more into the system, in
Mhm.
which they'll never be able to use.
Yep.
Um, and even then, it's just like, whoa, what if like what if this other human gets a service?
Yes.
Uh, but yeah, it's so gross.
Yeah, no, it's like, who cares if how they immigrated to this country or wherever that in the world? Everybody deserves basic human rights, housing, healthcare, education, clean water, access to food, disposable income, like all these things. And we have enough, financial and material resources to like make poverty go away on a global scale, or to give everybody health care in the United States. But because we, live in this, especially in the US, it's really highly capitalist system, and we bought into this myth of individualism. And if you don't pull yourself up by the bootstraps, that's your fault. And so if you don't end up with housing or healthcare, then you can just, you know, crawl into a ditch and die. And it's just like, it doesn't need to be that way. But it's like, that's how this system like functions. And I really wish, like, how the Republicans oftentimes will say, oh, these radical Democrats, they want to bring socialism to the United States. I so wish that was true, but it's not. It's like, yeah, it's so interesting.
Yeah, no, we do have two right-wing parties. Like, yeah, it's just I almost want to join. I almost want to joke. I'm like, yeah, this election was stolen. We didn't get this only for Pete Buttigieg to get a cabinet position. I said before this happened that if this happened, it'd be like, nope, nope, I'm moving out of the States, or I was like, I'm gonna do something horrible because that cannot happen. He is the most annoying thing that came out of 2020. Uh, uh
I
he
know. I yeah, I keep like telling my partner, it's like, could we just move to Cuba or like I don't Nicaragua, somewhere that has more of like a
Yeah.
collective spirit that the government's actually looking out for the best interests of the people. I'd obviously need to, learn Spanish to do that. But it's like, yeah, it's like just so, can be just so disheartening because there's so
Yeah.
much shitty things happening in the United States. But there's also, um, I don't know, some good stuff too, like how Oregon voters, legalized small possession of all drugs. That's awesome. Same with the, therapeutic use of psilocybin mushrooms, and more states are, legalizing marijuana and stuff. So it's like
Yeah.
there's some good things happening, but I still can't believe that like we couldn't even get even a vote on Medicare for all during a pandemic. And there's, I don't know if you've seen on Twitter, there's kind of a lot of discussion on the left going on if like AOC and kind of progressive members of Congress should force like Nancy Pelosi to bring it to the Medicare for all bill to the floor to get a vote to see who actually supports it or not. I don't know. Do you have any like thoughts on that? If
The horrible thing too is that sometimes I get so overloaded with like, yeah, what the Democratic Party is doing on like my timeline that sometimes I ignore what they're doing. I have different strong feelings about you know, the squad or whatever.
yeah,
But yeah, it feels um like a lot of the times they will and will still bow down to larger
yeah,
I think and that's yeah, like Medicare for all, it's again during a pandemic. I mean, like when they're saying like, oh, it'll overload or healthcare system, do we ever ask ourselves why do we have a healthcare system so bad that it wouldn't be able to handle this? And so, or like people are like, oh, there won't be any beds in the hospitals. And I'm like, what if all the people building private condos got their, permits revoked and all these places were turned into hospitals? Like, um, personally, I do find there's a lot to criticize about like China, but they did build like a giant hospital in like 20 days. So I want to be like, why don't you just build more hospitals? Have you considered that? And so much it's horrible seeing because when you can see exactly what's going on and seeing so many people suffering and seeing that it it could all be solved,
yep,
that is purposely people letting others die, not only with COVID but like with anything. People are starving, people are moving out. I need to check more on this, but we're about to enter like the hardest like economic hunger crisis, and we don't even talk about it because it seems um so taboo. So we have to be like hush hush about it, or otherwise we can't. You don't say that in polite company, it's almost what it feels like, but it's true. Another thing that I think it's positive about 2020 is that in a way it's also brought the best in people. Like I just learned about a couple of community fridges, and I need to get yeah, but a community fridge, basically, from what I learned, I think they've done it in other places like Portland, Minneapolis, is
mhm,
where there's food and everyone can grab it, and mutual aid.
yeah,
I had only heard about sort of the idea, and I was gonna read the book, but I never did. Or I think I tried to, but I was so enchanted by this idea and kind of seeing it play out in 2020 to this like extensive level, especially in the States, especially in a place where it's like individualism to the point of exceptionalism.
yeah,
It's really, really, really amazing to see so many people care and work together. People are like, oh, communism isn't by nature. I'm like, what does that even mean? But at the same time, I feel like humans are instinctively kind of work together, and it's just this like artificial competitiveness that we're dealing with. I think it's like what also makes us so sick all the time and has allowed for these like heartless people again. They're letting us starve.
Yeah.
They're letting us starve. We can't even remember that $1 trillion that they put into Wall Street before before like Wall Street then like crashed. And I can't it was like $1 trillion worked for 15 minutes and then nothing, and that wasn't controversial, and it didn't drawn out like this entire year um for the pandemic
Yeah.
at all. Like the stimulus package, you can be Wall Street, and then maybe like a day or two you'll get that, and you can be yeah, I don't even know what's they say they're close to finishing, but I don't know. And it's really terrifying because it's special, like, pandemic acts, like, money, even a lot of people are going to lose a lot of money in protections because it's set to expire on the 23rd. So,
Yeah.
and then yeah, like how how can you how can you like house someone when like they don't have any money or food, and you're required to like, and everything again is either means tested or it's like a lottery. It's not a joke trying to get housing aid. It's like, I think it is probably like winning the lottery, and I think it's crazy. Housing aid is just like every 8 months, every 2 years, they maybe open up a waiting list, and then if you win the lottery, you get to go into the waiting list. And um, so on purpose, there's all these people homeless, and there's
Yeah,
all
because
these people.
it's not because of lack of homes. There's actually, I think, more homes than like there are homeless
Yeah,
people in the United States, but it's like a lack of priorities. And like in the corporate media, they never cover things from like a left, from a left lens. It's always from, their corporations point
yeah,
of views, and the people get into those positions for a reason, kind of how
yeah.
Chomsky talks about, manufacturing consent, and
Oh
how,
my
all
god.
those people
Yeah.
on
There I have
corporate.
volunteer babies. This is what they call them because I'm just kidding. I'm 26, but they're like 21. So I was talking to them. It was so much fun, and I was just like, okay, so you two want to hear about manufacturer consent? They're like, yeah. So, but no, go on, and it's great. That's also American Requiem for American Dream, and that's free on YouTube. Um, if anyone wants to check it out, everyone should. It's great, but yeah,
Yeah, it's like we have these, millionaire news anchors on MSNBC, Fox, and all the other ones telling people how they don't need help right now because they're kind of bought to say that, and they don't actually know what's going on for the working class. They're so disconnected from that. Just like I remember several months ago, like Nancy Pelosi did this interview with one of the late night talk show hosts, and she was showing off her two like $10,000 plus freezers full of
Oh, is
her
that what it was?
bougie ass delivery like ice cream. And this is like when tens of millions of people have lost their jobs.
Wait,
We're
do
in
you
the
think we
middle
could
of
use
the
your freezers for the vaccines that need to be powered? Or like even
yeah, and it's like literally
zero?
like that is how out of touch most of these politicians are, because I mean they don't have to be, because they're kind of corporate donors and the very wealthy. Like that's who they're beholden to. Otherwise we would have, like Medicare for all, or emergency UBI, canceling rent, canceling mortgages, canceling student loan debt. It's
Yeah.
like, yeah. And I
It's,
just what do you think like would actually force, these kind of systems of power to change any in any type of substantive way, if you think there is a way? I mean,
I think because there is like such I my idea would be general strike. I think that's I don't know if it's, too idealistic, and this is me being very pragmatic. But a general strike is so terrifying and so immobilizing. In Seattle, do you know about the 1919 Seattle general strike?
a tiny bit.
Yeah, no, well, so this is all really most people you have to know about is that around 1919 and in the late 1890s to like the progressive era, there were a lot of strikes, and it was like almost a golden age of being in the union,
Mhm.
being a unionist and working. So when World War I was over, there were all these shipyard workers, and then the government was like, okay, well, yeah, we're just gonna reduce your wages in a half. So all of these shipyard workers basically stopped working, and then other people stopped working because of them. Not just shipyard workers, like let's say retail workers started supporting them because they thought it was unfair, or the people who navigated or the ship crew started also striking. So it was so terrifying that by the second day, basically what was the inception or the enforcement of SPD was this. The mayor at the time, he it was so freaked out about the power of the general strike that he armed civilians. He was just like, enforce, and then um, give more weapons or money and increase the size of SPD, and they basically beat people into submission. And not only that, then they started passing acts that manage, like, your activities, your
Mhm.
union activities, like because of it. There no So legally, there is this thing where like a wild strike is illegal, a secondary strike is illegal, like if you're not part of sort of that
Yeah.
industry or that subsection. Like if you're a cook and the guy who brings you your tomatoes is like, well, that's so unfair. I'm gonna stop bringing tomatoes because I am signing in solidarity with you. Then any kind of money that the union has, it can't be used because it's not a legitimate strike. It's not approved dissent. It's not rubber stamp dissent. You have to wait 5 weeks, around 5 weeks, to get a letter that you don't understand that freaks you out, and then you try calling, and then you just like keep calling the 800 number for your state, and you're like, what's going on? um that's kind of that the secondary strike is just made illegal, and also sort of like propaganda machine, where unionists are painted a certain way, where like I'm trying to like, yeah, like where people are led to believe that this is not the way they were not supposed to stand together, that we are all individuals who have you know the great potential to be millionaires if we just make the right decisions, like not being born poor or something. Then yeah, but I think if if we were to be organized all together, a general strike, it's the closest thing that we could get. I mean, I'm not sure how France is doing now, but usually France is pretty unified in striking. It, like, they've immobilized things so quickly, and I'm gonna have to look more into it because they recently passed a law that makes it illegal to take pictures or videos of the police,
Yeah.
which would, it's complete again repression of the state, and of course it is, because who are the actors of like state violence, who are the protectors of capitalism. Like every time people are like, oh, rioters, like we must protect property, because property is so valued, and it's so above humanity. But they need the workers, they need us. That's why it's terrifying when we stop. They need us, we don't need them, they need us. So if everyone realized that, or if everyone managed to work together and realize that, and I think, I'm not saying it's impossible, because I think more and more and more we can do that. But a general strike to immobilize the entire United States economy would terrify the most powerful people in the world, but would let them know that we know that they need us.
Hmm. No, yeah, that's a really good point, and something I don't know if you've heard of Boots Riley before, but he made the same point during an interview, and yeah, you brought up the same thing that you talked about, how like those kind of solidarity strikes are illegal, but if we get people that are ready and willing to, break those kind of anti-labor, anti-union laws,
Yeah.
then like you were saying, we would be able to force probably the capitalist class for some concessions, because we would be, kind of attacking them, and the only thing that they care about is their kind of wealth and power and status. Because during that same interview, he also made the point, we've seen the largest protest movement in history of the United States, this Black Lives Matter movement over the last several months and kind of years, because it did start under Obama, and how like what type of substantive change has actually come from that. And he kind of made the point, like we haven't really seen any of that substantive change, because we haven't really forced the powers that be, the capitalists more or less, to we haven't forced them to give anything up, unfortunately. And it just, yeah, I think you're totally spot on. It's just going to take people that are kind of ready and willing to organize and be willing to break those labor laws against those kind of solidarity strikes in order to actually get that change to happen. But it's going to be a lot more difficult because of how unions have been kind of systematically attacked over the years, especially in the private sector. There's still a little bit more union membership in the public sector, but it kind of seems like a monumental task, but it's like also super crucial, because how else are we going to get things like Medicare for all, tuition free college, canceling student loan debt, getting rid of the military industrial complex, the security state, the racist white supremacist institution of policing, the criminal and justice complex, like all of these things. And they all kind of have in common is that like they need, and they like run on money. And if you kind of cut off that source, then I think you're totally right, and we'll be able to see some change.
Yeah, but what do you feel like? Do you think, can you think of any other, or do you think of other methods that could, yeah, because it feels like momentum is dying in a way, and people are tired. It's like it's almost like the end of the year, and people have been so resilient, but things are looking very grim.
um I mean, I definitely think, yeah, just building labor power. If you're in, happen to be in a workplace that doesn't have a union, trying to organize them, I think could obviously be, helpful, just to kind of build it from the grassroots and then up. And then also, I think, I mean, just these type of, ballot initiatives can be super helpful, like the stuff in Oregon we talked about. Get something like that here in Washington. I mean, that doesn't necessarily address the overall problem of capitalism, but also by, legalizing drugs on a state level, that still would, benefit a lot of people, especially people and communities of color and other marginalized groups that are often kind of singled out by the police for putting that stuff into their body, when they're obviously not going after rich white people in different areas of Seattle, who are probably using a lot more drugs and a lot more expensive drugs than the
Yeah,
people on the street.
yeah, yeah. No, yeah. No, you can have your drugs as long as you're rich. I don't know. There was like, I think it was a while when Zoom first started being used more and more, where they were like, oh, like your Zoom video is not going to be encrypted unless you have like a premium license, because they were talking about different things like, um, insidious, horrible stuff like exploitation and all that stuff that people could use Zoom for. But the thing is, like, if you had a premium license, then it was okay. Then you can get away with doing that stuff,
Yeah.
but not if you didn't have a premium license. So it's so glaringly obvious, but it's so hard to kind of, bring it up to attention. It gets, again, the corporate media either doesn't care, or they try to hide it as much as possible. Because yeah, like, you don't see if anything of substance. I feel like I did have a lot of fun writing this rebuttal to the guy who's just like, Dr. Jill, you should drop the doctor. I think for me it was more about what an asshole he was than Jill Biden, because now at this point it's also just like the neoliberal media being like, Joe Biden, she is a feminist. Like, remember Joe Biden when she like tackled a protester at her like husband's rally? Like, yeah, that seems like someone that I really care for, but it's all the same too.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you can have your first woman CIA imperialist server. I'm like, I I I've thrown my lifetime works to feminism, but I'm like, I don't think that's feminism. If,
Yeah,
here's
he'll
your woman imperialist.
Biden will have the most diverse cabinet in the history of Lockheed Martin and Goldman Sachs. Like, wow, that's huge step forward for women around the world, especially in the global south. It's great.
Yeah. Or no, that's especially with like, and it's really hard to like really see it happen too. But with immigration, um, they're like first Hispanic, which by the way, I hate the word Hispanic and the fact that people sometimes are like come up to me and are like, isn't Latinx like, people could trying to like make your language different? I'm like, I don't really care. I think if you really care so much about the way Latinos are using Latino, why don't you just like start with Hispanic first? Go there. It makes my skin crawl. Um, and but anyway, so it's like, new director of Homeland Security, um, Hispanic, and I just like I there's almost something insidious about it. Every time I hear it, I get nauseous. It's like, you're like it's like think about any horrifying thing. Think about like concentration camps and being told like, oh, this person who's in head of running this, concentration camps or any other camp um is of your same race or gender, or you like blue, they like blue, it's okay. It's not. I think it's I just don't understand it, and it almost feels sick, like a cruel game that they're playing with us.
Yeah, well, it's like completely in line with kind of, I don't know, liberalism or liberal ideology, not really changing any of these oppressive systems, but diversifying people at the head of them. Oh, like, yeah, see, we're changing. We have this black man who's now head of the Pentagon, and we have Neera Tanden in there, and she's the head of domestic economic policy. And like,
Yeah.
it's like it's not really going to change anything for the people. I guess maybe the drones will have like a pride flag on them or a
Yeah.
Black Lives Matter
It's like
sticker as they're raining down bombs on people all over, the globe. So
after the bomb, there's just like glitter coming out. It's like it's okay
exactly.
now.
Yeah.
But it's so true. It's like here you go. There's it's not gonna make any difference to you if you're gonna die or suffer or starve to death. It doesn't matter. Sometimes it feels even more cruel, and like you're like, why would you do that? Again, like there is a lot of misconception, but there is like a lot of things about the Latino culture, and it is encouraged a lot by the white supremacist state that we live, and a lot of like people not trying to examine their like anti-blackness like in the Latino community, because a lot of these like Proud Boys or like white supremacists are Latinos, and it's just but anyway, so like I kind of lost my train of thought. I was like, there's something with um oh yeah, but there are a lot of conservative Latinos, and then there's a lot of like things that we could talk about that is just like so much more important. But I want to say like this year, and it makes so much sense. The one person, and again, I think the media exaggerates this because ratings about Latinos and like Latinos being so hard to win over. But during the campaigning, Bernie Sanders is so far the only candidate to earn widespread uh, endorsement by Latino people. It's
Mhm.
incredible.
Yep.
And why wouldn't he? When he was mayor of Burlington, he established his own like little foreign affairs department because he was so angry at what Reagan was doing. He when the Sandinistas were in Nicaragua, I think he even went there personally.
Mhm.
And to me, I think not only historically but also like, working class Latinos and Chicanos and all of us are, I think Bernie Sanders is the only person like that I know of that has earned widespread support of Latinos, and very, very, very excitedly.
And
And yeah,
yeah, I think, I mean, a lot of the reasons, like I saw a lot of the exit polls why people supported Bernie Sanders was because of like policy. It's not because he was some like interesting, quirky, old guy. It was because no, he actually supported things that would improve the material conditions of people's lives, particularly the most, vulnerable and marginalized. And that's why, the democratic establishment like did everything they could like behind the scenes. Like Obama was working his magic to get people to drop out. And yeah, it was interesting what you're talking about, how like there's a lot of Latino people or some within Proud Boys, and it just kind of makes me think how you can uphold white supremacy while still being
yeah.
a person of color as well.
Yeah. And again, it's like, why do poor people vote against their interests? And it's this propaganda machine because there's poor people who will uphold the interests of the rich, but even more so is like, I wish my French was better, but like the petit bourgeoisie, the professional managerial class,
Yep.
they're the ones who are helping do it, basically do the bidding of the rich, because they think that that way they too might one day be there, but um no. And because of them, they're kind of the glass or the wall that stops kind of the working class. They are
Yeah, and I feel
like
like yeah, I
in
feel like a lot of those people within the PMC, those are kind of the folks like, oh well, as long as Trump's gone, we can go back to brunch and not worrying about stuff, because their material conditions, like they have a house, they have health care, they have a good paying job. So like Trump's out, don't worry about it. We're going back to brunch. See you guys next 4 years or
yeah.
something.
Yeah, and that's the scary thing is that, in 4 years from now, as things become worse and worse, and we don't directly address the rise of right wing violence as well, like they're like, oh, 2024, Trump is going to think about running. Like, what if he does? What if something worse is us? Like, what if Tucker Carlson does? Um,
Yeah.
and then the Democratic Party would be like, oh my God, what did we do? It's like, oh God, it was, the meme with the person with the bike and then themselves put like
The
the little
stick and
crowbar, yeah, in
yeah.
the bike, and it's like, why? That's the Democratic Party in a nutshell. Because yeah, 2024, and they'll be like, well, what happened? What happened? Why? How did things end up getting so much worse? And um, yeah,
And
it's just like, you know, and it's like because you didn't care, because you're not gonna do anything, because they're not doing anything. You're still just upholding some overlord class, and yeah, you can go to your home. You can, you know, you don't feel as stuck inside if you have a 5 bedroom home, or anything like that. And
yeah, and like the same people who this election cycle are saying that this is once in a lifetime thing. Trump is like so horrible, he's the worst president ever. Then it's like going to be the same thing next time, like, oh, just you gotta vote for this person because we don't want Trump again. You gotta vote for Kamala because who knows if Biden will be even alive 4 years from now. And like just the whole, I don't know, lesser of like two evils argument. Chris
but
Hedges.
what if Biden dies and it's not the vice president, but it's the candidate, the second Democratic candidate with most votes, which I think would be Bernie. So, so
Yeah, I mean
Bernie can
that that
still wait.
that
It can
that
still
would
get.
that would be kind of cool if somehow
Uh,
we got Bernie between now and January or whatever. But yeah, I don't know. I never really, I don't know. I guess it doesn't really matter because we live in Washington. It was going to go to like the Democratic candidate no matter what. But just like the whole lesser of two evils voting like only applies to like the working people. But we had, all these kind of financial oligarch Wall Street type people saying, if Bernie was the candidate, then we'd be voting for Trump. So the lesser of two evils only applies to the people who actually want
Yeah,
something for their vote.
yeah, it's lesser of two evils for you know how they want to oppress us the most. And this is another thing, Medicare for all. Um, I think part of it is the fact that they're tying you like you have a couple of options sometimes. People like trying to buy insurance by just yourself is extremely expensive. A lot of people fall on that in between where they can get public health care and then where they cannot.
Yep.
And so you have to like they this decreases the idea that you could just work for yourself, that you could have your own thing going on. But no, they tie it so you have to by force your livelihood in all kind of senses have to sell your labor
Yep.
to these people because they know how precious it is, and how important we are.
You got to
So
work or you'll die basically if
yeah,
you want.
work or you'll die. Or don't work for yourself because then we'll make it really hard for you.
Yeah.
Or like, sort of like, or you have to work, or you have to. It's in all sense of it, capitalist is like racist, ableist. If you're not producing all the time, if
Yep.
there's nothing of you of value, that's exactly it. Like it's really horrible that we're looking at the pandemic numbers, but a lot of places even don't meant a lot of these numbers exclude the number of deaths of long-term care homes, and that's another thing in social work that really affected me. I used to like do assessments for people that needed to be in adult family homes or in long-term care homes or nursing homes, and a lot of the people who are dying are, people in long-term places or people in
Yep.
prison, but no one is thinking about them because in capitalism eyes, if you have a disability, if you're older, or if you're in prison, you
Yep.
can't offer anything. So who cares? You like, who cares? You might as well be the least of anyone's priority. And this
Yeah.
pandemic, looking back, that's going to be a really horrible thing. But and I wish that we could have some sort of a tribunal, just one last tribunal where we're like, these are the people um, who we are charging for all these things that they did during the pandemic for letting people die. It's and tribes are like being affected the most, but again, just ongoing genocide of the American empire.
Yeah, like that article you sent me, how that hospital, I think it was in New Mexico,
Mm,
was singling
yeah,
out Native American mothers and like separating their babies from them without any type of like consent. And it was specifically targeted towards them, even if they weren't coming from like a high density place with a lot of like coronavirus
like
case.
yeah, it's called the. I think they had them on some sort of list. It was the Pueblo list, and it's also reminds both this and what has happened with the foresight, like almost experiments on Latino on like immigrant women in being in prison, and then had this thing happening to these women, like brown women and black women, like reproductive rights are always kind of
Mhm.
completely ignored.
Yep.
um I mean, I'm not gonna deny at all what like the importance of like abortion free and for all is, but I think there's so much more to go past that because what is more in reproductive justice is people whose children are being taken away, who's like, and that's another thing why we have the like for being on the global north or a global north nation, we have incredibly high mortality rate of people giving birth.
Yep.
It's the highest. It's incredible. But of course it is because it's either systematic and just an ongoing genocide. Um,
Yeah, and yet we spend the most on healthcare of any country, but we have all these horrible health outcomes. Oh, I wonder if it has something to do with it being for profit and not for the
yeah,
well-being of the patient, of the person.
yeah. A lot of
Yeah.
things they mentioned too about drugs. Another thing that I've noticed, and I think I've experienced and just talked to people, and I've experienced myself, is like the system is so hard to deal with, and it's so inaccessible that a lot of times people self-medicate. I mean, one, there's like a lot we can talk about drugs and kind of like the morality of like as long as you're rich, not a site, it's okay. But also the fact that a lot of people who um, it's like there's the community of the like mental health and or the trauma
Yep.
and that they can't access doctors or they can only access um, one doctor. And like we would move people into adult family homes outside of Seattle because the ones in Seattle were so expensive or didn't take Medicaid. But these people, all of their like specialists were at Harborview. So you imagine like, yeah, being put in like South King County or Pierce County and then having to come all the way to Harborview and back. And
Hmm.
again, that's why so many of these people are dying and but as long as the capitalism's okay, as long as the insurance companies are okay. Also the shortage of health workers. This is someone that I probably will try to link you the book or this. His name is Dean Baker. He's a really good economist because I don't
Heard
know
of him,
economy
yeah.
that well. Yeah, he was talking about too how because there's certain associations that are super just to keep to support capitalism, but one of them is the American Medical Association. So apparently around 2001 they like were telling Congress to not pass a certain visa that allows high skilled immigrants such as doctors because the more doctors that were in the country, the less money doctors would make. So the American Medical Association to limit the amount of doctors coming from out of the country. And now we're talking about people having a healthcare worker shortage. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that our Congress, I want to go back and look at who voted for it, but yeah, they made it so like, nope, we can't have too many foreign-born doctors.
Yeah.
There'd be too many doctors. I one time I was telling my friend about how I watched this amazing documentary about Cuba where every community had a doctor,
Yep.
and then I was telling my friend about it who lives in the UK, and she was like, wait, you don't have a community doctor? Like she was
No.
like, wait, what do you mean? Look, I was like, what? So also save the NHS. You know, this is a funny story. I'm not sure if it's true, but because the neoliberal power couple was Reagan and Thatcher, and then Reagan was just like, "Have you ever considered privatizing the NHS?" And even Thatcher, who was just
Really
a
horrible in your own right.
horrible warmonger, and also created a destruction of so many institutions. Even she was like, "Are you stupid?" But at this point, I think with the NHS, it's at risk. It's funny. Bernie has a brother named Larry Sanders, who's also in politics, but in the UK.
Oh,
And he's of the Green Party. He's pretty cool. I think he might be seen as like a little bit more radical than Bernie, but again, that might be because in England that could be more accessible. But
yep.
because here, any sort of like decency, it just like, hey, living wage equals, oh my God, that's socialism. Put them on FBI list. There's this.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, have you watched the Amazon anti-union video?
Uh-uh.
Oh wow. Okay, I'll send it to you. It's basically this union training and then it's like how do the warning signs of someone trying to organize at work.
Uh,
It's terrifying. It's both hilarious and terrifying though.
that was at Amazon, you said?
Yeah, yeah. But
Like
insane.
how many billions does Bezos need? He's like a 200 billion? Like,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
it's like easy to vilify the person, but it's like the system that allows
yeah,
that type of greed and exploitation to be rewarded. So obviously Bezos is kind of a bad character, but it's also like this
yeah.
system.
Yeah, people are like, there's good billionaires and there's bad
No.
billionaires. Like, no, one that people again love lauding is Bill Gates, and I hate him so much. Um, there is so much too, and again in our program, there was someone who I really admired. I'm not gonna say who they are because they're pretty like high up, but anyway, so I learned a lot about you know, kind of um Wide Awake. It was like the program, and it was like I realized a lot of things in which like racism was tied to like capitalism. To me, you
Yep.
can't undo one unless
Nope.
you undo the other.
For sure.
And we were talking, and um, this was actually also in one of my anthropology classes. Despite this person being in our department, I've encountered them more times in this other department than in our department. I just think that's really weird. But again, thank you, School of Social Work. Um, but so we are talking, and they're like, "Oh, but Bill Gates is like, look, he could be like Bill Gates." And I was just like, "Wait a minute." And then I explained the ways that Bill Gates like exports neoliberalism. How Bill Gates, he's talking about this investing in fuel, but he invests in Monsanto, which talking about the Indian farmer strikes. A lot of it is like uh, trade
GMO
for
seeds and stuff,
yeah,
probably. Yeah.
yeah, like GMOs by themselves are not kind of thing, but the way Monsanto is forcing other countries to use their copyrighted seeds. What is this horrible capitalism world where you can copyright a seed? I'm like, what do you mean?
Copywriting like life. Yeah.
Copyright a seed? I'm like, what? But
Mhm.
then forcing them. And he invests in this company, and he is friends with the prime minister who's outright a right wing fascist as well, like just like Trump. Like he like the um like Hindu nationalism has increased greatly. So, and Bill Gates is okay with talking to this guy, and I bring this up again, showing like neoliberalism, the way it's oppressive in all senses, and then they just were like, we just want to all get along, and it was just some bullshit, and I was just like, but I learned this from you. How can you see that Bill Gates is doing the same thing?
Mhm.
It's doing the same thing, and it's
It's
God,
like,
it does remind me sort of like, don't always idealize a person because it can be hard, but at the same time I'm like, really, come on, you should know what, just like all billionaires are bad. You're allowed to hate more than one billionaire at a time. There's enough hate to go around.
yes.
There's actually not enough. We need more hatred towards billionaires.
Yes, yeah, there's too many people who think like, oh yeah, if I just work hard enough, I could, be a Jeff Bezos and exploit Amazon workers and fire people trying to unionize, and like they only have a certain amount of bathroom breaks and I can track them all day. But if I
Yeah.
do all that stuff, I could be very rich too.
Yeah, getting involved in city politics to the point that people are dying. It's awful. Like Amazon, we are a company town in a sense, and every time Amazon's like, "Well, we're gonna leave," and it's like, "Okay, cool, fuck, leave, just fucking leave." He's made this spend so much more money of this pandemic, and so many people in Seattle are on the streets, and it's just we're a progressive city, Democrat
Allegedly.
led city. Yeah, no, that's not doing shit. Not at
Yeah,
all.
because they dumped a bunch of money in to try to defeat Shama Sawant when she was up for re-election last time, but they weren't able to, which is great because frankly, I think she's the one really only city council member who actually has the best interests of working people at heart. And what do you know? She's also identifies and a socialist and acts like one. So it's like
Yeah,
we need more of those
yeah,
type of folks,
yeah,
speaking truth to power.
yeah. And of course, they're gonna target her too as well because she's a woman of color
Mhm.
who, um, it's especially sad white women don't join solidarity of how much or we attacked, and how they even play into like male supremacy by into the thing that we're super angry and violent, and they when they speak up we're like, oh, don't call us shrill, but they're like, oh my gosh, why are you so angry, you're so violent, I'm gonna cry, I feel so uncomfortable around you, sort of white tears. And it's like, again, you're a woman, why stop upholding this male supremacy, but they do because they also are afraid to lose the status from whiteness.
Yeah.
And it's really not.
Yeah. Well, a lot of heavy stuff. How about we end it, I don't know, talking about maybe some self-care tips, or just bring in some more, I guess, positivity to kind of close it out.
Well, I think one thing that I'm trying to do better, and I think it's a good self care tip for everyone, is like not to be so hard on yourself, and the fact that it's okay to be exhausted. Things are really, really hard,
Yep.
and to like disconnect from things. I don't know. I'm trying to like enjoy more of like things that I want to do, and rather than things for school or my unpaid internship or anything like that, putting those boundaries, and also trying to organize self better. Because when they say, because self care can be kind of hard, or it can be, people always kind of just write it off as like, oh, I'm just gonna take a bath, but a lot of it is like doing things that you don't like that will help you in the long run. And for me, it's like trying to organize a lot of things just for like my brain, because I have like ADHD, a very nearly virgin brain. So it's like going in all these directions at once, and I need to organize. But a tip that I've learned so far about organizing too is like, people say make a list,
Uh-huh.
but like if you are not very specific in what you want to do, like I wanted to be like, if I write check email, I might get overwhelmed. But if I like reply perhaps to this email or be on the lookout for this email, helps my brain kind of be like, okay, I know which action to take,
Mhm.
rather than just kind of like over my mouth. And I don't know, this was great. I had a lot of fun. So this was
Yeah,
a lot of fun.
me too.
What about you? What's like some self care that you're gonna be doing this winter?
Yeah, I definitely resonate with the point you're making about um kind of not expecting so much from ourselves, especially just kind of the conditions of the world we live in, especially the United States right now. It's just such a shit show. We shouldn't be expecting us to kind of either work or be as present in all these other kind of aspects of our lives, just because we are dealing with really, unprecedented times with all the bad stuff that's happening, frankly. So just giving ourselves like more grace in our
Yeah,
day-to-day lives is super important. And yeah, I definitely resonate with the point about disconnecting. I try to take like at least a day off a week from social media, and I definitely feel better and not as tied to my phone, and I'm
yeah,
able to do that. And just getting outside in nature, like bike riding if the weather's, not super bad, or just walking, or yeah,
yeah,
just getting outside in nature, breathing fresh air is super important. And yeah, doing some reading that's not school related over this
yeah.
break will
That's
will be nice. So
Yeah, I just joined. I'm in this like Trotsky reading group, and I'm so excited.
awesome.
It's great. So yeah, that's one thing I'm looking forward to. But yeah, I hope everyone has a good winter.
Yeah.
Have
I,
a good winter.
yeah, I hope you do too. And then yeah, we could even maybe do this next week, and we could maybe
Yeah,
even um try to find somebody else from our cohort if they
yeah.
want to talk and
Yeah, because
just
they have so many great different perspectives. Again, because these are people who see these policies day to day. And but I feel like a lot of our cohort is very self-aware.
Mhm.
And for example, I'm taking the last thing that I still haven't turned in. It's the thing for my gender and sexual identities class within the school of social work, and I'm doing a piggy's my project is in incarceration and the LGBT community, and a lot of folks are also doing sort of like the criminal system and the overlap between that. And I was just so happy to see that. So yeah, they definitely have a great perspective and a lot to learn from. On my relations, like, who did you learn from the most? I was like, my peers.
Yep, I agree. Yeah, a lot of really, yeah, awesome people in our program, and I co-sign that. I've probably gotten more from being around people in our cohort, whether in person or virtually, than probably what I've gotten from
Yeah.
most of the instructors, honestly.
Yeah, agree. All right.
Awesome. Yeah, well, thank you for your time. This was really fun, and
Yeah,
yeah,
I love
hopefully
this.
we can find somebody to
Yeah.
tag on next week
Yeah.
and have another chat.
Well, I actually too, I have this friend who I met at one of my day classes, but he is a social worker, and another thing that's great that I also thought could be cool to talk about once it would be the sort of oppression that social workers face and how we could maybe unionize better for social workers and government workers because there's a lot of stuff. And that's something that it really interests him because that's a byproduct of capitalism. So maybe I'll ask him. He's
Yeah,
great. Okay.
definitely. That'd be cool.
Okay. I'll message
Awesome.
you.
All right. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.